Okay. All right, everybody. I've got Dash behind this magical mirror, but first I'm going to read you a little bit about Dash. Kwiatkowski is a writer, podcaster, and paranormal investigator currently living in Providence, Rhode Island. They've spent a decade as a touring stand-up comedian and have been featured in comedy festivals around the country. They've been investigating the paranormal for several years and are pretty convinced Bigfoot is some sort of ghost. Hard agree on that one. Dash is also the co-creator of the new docuseries Liminal and one half of the podcast Psychic Friends. So, please give a warm welcome to, I'm gonna press all the right buttons, Dash!
Hello. Hi. Thank you. That was. Hey, can I also just say pronouncing the last name right? That never happens right off the jump usually. So great work. You did it. You did it great. You did it. You did it.
Awesome.
It means child of flowers, which is fun.
Oh.
And it's Polish, which I guess is fun. I don't. Someone asked in the chat for pronouns. They are they them. Thank you for asking. It was Dana Mob. Thank you, Dana Mob.
There they are, right at the top.
I'm very happy to be here.
I'm happy to have you here. So I guess I'll read a little bit about Liminal, and then we can sort of start or just go off, whatever you want.
How are we going to do it?
You've got the floor. So Liminal seeks to answer the question, why do queer trans people gravitate towards the paranormal? The 10-episode first season of this docuseries combines interviews, paranormal investigations, and help from practitioners of the strange to paint a picture of magic, trans experience, and the interesting history of their overlap in the American South. The series follows a main cast of non-binary investigators, Dash, their co-host Rosa Ascanom, and practicing witch Rocket Fox, and features interviews and paranormal investigations with queer and trans people living and practicing various types of magic in the South. And first of all, great job with the filming.
Thank you.
The pacing, the shots, all great. I know it takes a ton of work. Can you explain to me how you did all that?
Yeah, so with the pilot, we worked with a filmmaker, a guy named Andy from Superhuman Productions. So he shot the pilot with us, and so moving forward, we are working with a different production house called Strange Bird Films. There's a guy named Will. Andy has a lot of band documentaries and music videos, and I think he's moving out of the country. I'm not 100%. But we're really grateful for his work with us on the pilot. The pilot was all sort of self-funded and self-set up. I reached out. I found someone who wanted to work on this project. Rosa's been one of my best friends for basically as long as I've known her. We actually are from the same place. We're from the San Francisco Bay Area. We did not meet until we were both in New York for comedy. I was after that. We found out that in the San Francisco Bay Area, we had lived in the same apartment complex as children at the same time. Which is just wild, big magic synchronicity stuff. We found out that we're both from the same place because Rosa invited me to a party, and it was like at some point, it just evolves to people being like, "This is a funny YouTube video," and I put on Wet Pet San Pablo, which, chat, if you don't know about it, get at it. It is R.I.P. Wet Pets no longer exists, but it was a local pet store that had one of the greatest television advertisements of all time. I grew up watching it on television. Yeah, Wet Pet San Pablo. A spectacular ad, a spectacular thing. And Rosa was like, "How do you know about wet pets?" And I was like, "I grew up with wet pets." And from there, I think just, for the pilot, in terms of how we did it, just a lot of volunteer, a lot of us just kind of working and doing our best and trying to make something that felt genuine, I think. There's a lot of ghost shows that I really like that are fun and goofy, that have a lot of like doors slamming and people finding out that a faucet was on somehow and a lot of stuff. the realness of that, who is to say? I wasn't there. I can't speak to that. But we wanted to do something that just felt a little bit more I don't know, we're trying to lean more into documentary than reality TV, if that makes sense.
And I mean, I made one episode of sort of a similar sort of thing, and it took me 3 years to make it. It was just
Yeah.
me and another person literally doing
Totally.
everything. So
Totally.
I can only imagine all the discussions and the
Definitely.
decisions and it's really exhausting. So really, honestly, props to you for doing
Thank
it.
you. Thank you so
It's
much.
really great. So I guess I'll start asking you some questions. I really like how you
Okay.
started with the sort of human aspect of the Bell Witch story.
Yeah,
How natural phenomenon and maybe a great story can become legend or haunting.
definitely.
And do you think this is how sort of ghost stories can live on? And maybe why are ghosts usually so trauma based?
I think that it can be how ghosts live on. I think that one of the things that I like about the sort of the paranormal and the metaphysical is the sort of how sort of wide ranging and multifaceted things can be. I think that there can be ghost stories that are based in, lore and legends and mythology, and I think that there can be ghost stories that exist because, again, according to John Keel and Mothman Prophecies, if you're a person with latent psychic abilities and you write fiction in a place, it's possible to create a ghost of one of your fictional characters via
Right.
your sort of your psychic energy. So I think there's lots of different ways. In terms of why it's trauma based, I mean, I have at least with regard to like American ghost stories, I've talked about this a little bit before, but I think that America, the culture of sort of this country, has a lot of people not wanting to feel guilty about the things that had to happen for them to be able to exist in the way that they exist.
Yeah.
I think people want to pretend, which is why if you watch a lot of like American ghost movies, like Poltergeist, right? The plot of Poltergeist is what a nice white family who never did anything wrong moves in somewhere that something bad happened, but it's not their fault, and they don't have to do anything, and it's these
They're
mean ghosts that are mad
victims.
at them. They are victims,
Yeah.
and so I think that it's a lot of the ghost stories that get told sort of focus in on that, like, oh, well, I didn't have anything to do with the stolen land that I live on, because people don't want to think about the ways in which they contribute to the ongoing evil stuff. I think that that's the sort of like that's the socio-political sort of version of the answer. I also just think that like trauma is the stuff we remember. Traumatic things are the things when I think back on the stuff that has made me into the person that I am, like, there's good stuff, but like trauma sticks with you. Trauma's it's sort of it is loud and it's painful, and I think that when we think about ghosts and hauntings and sort of spooky things, I think it's very easy for those two things to sort of be very intertwined.
Yeah, as a way to not forget the
Yeah.
horrors of the past, I think is why a lot of ghost stories live on.
Yeah, definitely.
What makes your paranormal show different than the rest of the paranormal shows in terms of approach or subject?
We don't have any white guys in cargo shorts, and that's our sort of our big, that's our promise. That's the liminal guarantee.
No military talk.
No military talk. In terms of what makes us different, I think even across, because there are shows, there are shows with queer ghost hunters, there are shows with trans ghost hunters on them, and one of the things that we really wanted to do was we wanted to make our show, we wanted to explore the actual connection of queerness and transness and the paranormal, and not just have it like we are queer people doing a paranormal investigation and sort of doing it in a standard sort of way. Because I think that's been done well. It's been done well. Except, I'm not. This is not me shitting on other creators, but I think we haven't seen, or I haven't seen at least, anyone really look at like what is that connective tissue? What calls us to this field or this medium? Why, when you go on Etsy and you search gay Mothman, are there an infinite number of results, right? Because
Oh, really?
you know Everything, right? We love cryptids, we love tarot, we love astrology. Like, I've never had to be an astrology gay because I've always had an astrology gay in arm's reach who can explain, who can explain astrology to me. And so, but it's obviously, this is generalizing, and not every queer person does, but I think there is a huge amount of love for metaphysical things in the queer community, and I think that connection is tangible, and I think it goes both ways. And so we really want to explore and sort of follow that connection with what we're doing, beyond just like us getting out and doing a paranormal investigation. So I think in terms of like your average ghost show, I think the focus is sort of on that connection more so than the focus is on like, we're gonna document a ghost on camera, never before. We're not trying to do that sort of thing.
Yeah, I was thinking about that, and I was wondering like how important is the identity of the people investigating, doing a paranormal investigation? Do you think like some aspects of that are looking into a dark mirror, like looking into the dark aspects of the past, of the present? How important do you think identity is for people, and specifically investigating the paranormal? Because I think there's something special about the paranormal that is more artistically or expression based.
I think that identity is important for everything that anyone does, just sort of in general. And I think that for a lot of people who sort of who hold a sort of large market share of creating, I made the joke about white guys in cargo shorts, but I made that joke because it is traditionally mostly white guys in cargo shorts, and that's an identity too, and I think it's very easy for us to sort of see certain identities as default and not sort of consider, because every person has an identity. And I think on a sort of practical level, having a variety of identities and having a varied base of identities lets you tell a more interesting story, because you have more perspectives and you have more sort of standpoints to look at things. And I also think that, as I approach, ghost stuff with our queer ghost hunting team, I think it's very easy for the unknown or the strange to get labeled as villainous or dangerous or dark, and I think it's very easy to do that when the unknown and the strange feels othered, right? When it feels like something else. But I think when the
fear of the something you don't understand.
When the people doing the investigating have been othered themselves, and the people doing investigating sort of exist in those marginalized spaces, in those margins, I think it is easier to not necessarily label something as a demonic entity or a negative attachment, and just sort of say, like, I don't know what's going on here, I don't know what we're dealing with, but I'm curious. And sometimes it feels negative, and sometimes it feels positive, and sometimes it just feels neutral. But I think it's easier to not see something as intrinsically bad, and I think it's easier to give something maybe more of a fair shake in terms of figuring out what it actually is.
Yeah, you said the paranormal is a queer space. So what does queer mean to you in relation to the paranormal? For people maybe that don't use this word every day, or don't even know what ghost hunting or paranormal investigating is.
I think that in relation to the paranormal, I think queer, as I self-identify as queer, I self-identify as a queer person, and I think that there is something about being told that you have to exist in one specific way, being told that you have to, you are the gender that they tell you you have to have the sexuality that culture tells you that you must have, you have to exist in a very specific way. And I think sort of choosing to very proudly sort of say, I'm not going to be these things, or and for the people who are those things, actually taking the time to figure that out. I always say that to people who are thinking about their own gender. I say, think about it, take the time, and if you come out the other end of it and you realize you are the same gender that a doctor decided early on, you will have a better understanding of that gender than if you never took the time to think about it. So I think in terms of queerness, I think that there is a sort of a conscious deviation from what society says you are mandated to do. And specifically when we think about the paranormal, when we think about cryptids and ghosts, and the idea that the world and existence is more magical and has more possibilities and has more options than we're told that we can believe in, or we're told that we can exist. We're not told that you can go in the woods and have a magical encounter with glowing orbs or creatures that aren't supposed to exist. All these things are sort of told very specifically, like, this is not possible, this is not real. And I think that all feels very queer to me. That all feels very, and I can go into deeper in the thesis of the show, talking about the numerous pre-colonial societies that had people who existed outside of the Western gender binary, who were also considered magical, who were also considered mystical. My own culture, I'm a mixed race. I'm Korean American, and in Korea, before, one of the earliest sort of forms of magic practice was Mu, and the practitioners of Mu were called Mudang. And Mudang was a female role. Mudang practitioners it's a female shaman role, and Baksu Mudang were male people who would put on the dress and the affectations of the female Mudang and practice Mudang. And so even in my own culture, the crossing of the gender binary, the exploration of not existing in the way that maybe you are told you are supposed to exist, was involved in magical practice and was involved in light work and clearing dark energy and negative energy from places. So I think that even there is historical precedent for this idea that gender expression and gender identity outside of what is told to us now is acceptable is in itself sort of magic. I'll quote one of the people in the show who says trans people are naturally manifesting, because manifesting is taking a felt state and a felt idea and manifesting it into reality, taking this thing that you feel inside and creating it in the external, and that is the trans experience very, very much, I think.
And that's the art and theater and
absolutely
and expression. So and I know you're a past comedian, and I really wanted to talk to you about like the role of theatricality and the role of comedy and the paranormal, and if the two can even coexist. Are they incompatible?
I think they have to. No, I think they absolutely have to.
Or do people take you less seriously if you're willing to accept that sometime, well, maybe not the paranormal industrial complex. Like, I never really see any funny good times on the shows like that of white guy in cargo shorts, unless it's like deep bro humor,
I will say, laughed. Somebody asked me, and this got me thinking about it in a way that I think I really appreciate that they asked me. Somebody asked me, how do you not float off into space? And by that they meant, how do you not become like an angel numbers person who sees every driver's license plate?
Too.
Yeah.
I had that question.
How do you not float off into space? And for me, it is humor, because the phenomena and all these things are so fucking funny. It's always funny, and it gets to a funny place. And maybe that's just me and my experience and what I've done. The deity work that I do is with Dionysus, because I just feel a very specific connection, and sort of have for even longer than I realized I was doing this. And Dionysus, god of trans people, who transes the other gods through the mythology, also can take this form of a snake, which, if you've seen the pilot, the snakes are very relevant.
Patron saint of the Olympics, also.
Absolutely, gotten some hot water. It's fine. But humor. There's a point in the pilot where I'm doing the an Estes method investigation technique, and it's very negatively, I feel a lot of negative energy, and I feel very uncomfortable physically, and we get all the way through, and then at the end of it, the words teeth come through, and we had this big like thing about teeth where I had joked with the guy who was the town historian. He had I had to argue to keep this in the cut. This was important to me. He had said that oh, thank you for subscribing, Hoolery Schmoolery. If you're interested in helping us support episode 2, on our link tree, you'll find our Seed and Spark crowdfund. We're currently raising money for episode 2. and I think we're like 60% to the goal, which is very exciting. But we are an independent production, and it's all the help that people can give is definitely is appreciated.
! Guest, and you'll find also the YouTube link and Dash's link tree with all the stuff on it.
Thank you. And so we had been talking to the historian, and we're like, oh, do you have any cool things to show us? And he was like, I can show you Joel Bell's false teeth. And I was like, I don't actually want to see those. That's weird. And he was like, oh yeah, the last guy came in and I took him up, whatever. And I was like, oh, so he's like a real pervert then? And he's like, well, he's not a pervert. He's writing a book. And I thought that was very funny that I was making a joke about someone being a pervert, and the guy took it very, very seriously. And so we had this moment. And so during our investigation, I'm feeling very tense and I'm feeling very uncomfortable. And then the word teeth comes through, and it made me laugh. And the laugh sort of like broke it. It like broke the discomfort. It broke the sort of the feeling. But this is how it always is for me, where I think the thing that stops me from taking it too seriously, that stops me from being like, oh, every bird is a sign that means something, and every number is because it's funny. And whenever the most genuine feeling, when I feel like something is like reaching out and something is like tapping me on the shoulder, I'm engaging with something, it's always very, very funny. And the humor, I think, is very grounding for me.
Same.
And I think humor and laughing and I mean, horror and comedy go together. My favorite movie of all time is Evil Dead 2. I think horror and comedy are sort of are connected because people laugh when they're nervous, people laugh when they're scared, but laughing sort of it centers you. I think it grounds you, and it sort of helps you to navigate things that are otherwise maybe spooky or scary.
I'm a laugher when I get scared.
Yeah,
and it's like my most natural reaction, and it's really weird. I also made a little movie, and something happened, and my first reaction was to laugh, and it looked like we set it up, and I couldn't, like, my first thing was like,
yeah,
it's so weird.
But it feels so connected. I feel like these are very they're very interconnected sort of expressions, like this, the way that we experience fear, the way we experience humor. And I think that, I don't know, I think that I heard this described as so many people in the paranormal space, whether it's UFOs or cryptids or ghosts or whatever, are so dedicated to proving that they are not crazy and they're not wasting their time. And so I think we have to put on this air of like, this is very serious, and this is, I'm doing science right now.
I'm doing rationalism.
Which is like, maybe go do actual science then. That's not what this is about. I love that you can't prove these things. It's so much more interesting to me, the idea of investigating something that is by definition unknowable than
hardcore philosophy also.
Yeah, it's fun. It's fun and it's cool and it should be funny because we have to be able to laugh at ourselves. Otherwise, I think we would take ourselves too seriously, and I don't think that would be fun television.
Yeah, I think that's why, I guess, all these shows that you see, if you're making jokes and you laugh, then immediately the subject matter is not as serious anymore, and then it's not so scary, and then that's not good for money.
Yeah. We just yesterday we debuted the episode that we shot with Ray Wise from Twin Peaks. We shot a bonus episode with Ray Wise from Twin Peaks, which is very fun. He's a delightful man. And there's the first day we investigate with Ray, and it's really fun, and he's so weird, and he brought his own paranormal investigation gear, which is great. That was very exciting for me, because most people don't do that, and he had his own stuff. The second day we investigate with my friend Kaina, who is Ray's daughter, and we are dealing with a very, it's Kaina's space, and a friend of hers had been living there who had died in the space, who was like very, very sick, and kind of just let her live there for free. And it's it's very heavy. It's very heavy, and there's a lot of sadness, and we're doing the Estes, and like Kaina's crying, and we're connecting, and all of this stuff. And then we tried to do, we use a spirit board, and there's a point where the planchette won't move off of the D, and I was like, oh, it's really focused on the D, and everybody laughed and kind of made a joke about her friend, and like we had this moment where it was like, no, that's good though. Like, even if this is like a serious and emotional thing that we're all feeling very affected by this. Laughing is an emotion too. Like, humor is an emotion too. Experiencing, I don't think laughing or humor are emotions, but you know what I was trying to say. This is an emotional response too, and it's real. And I think that, I don't know. I just think it feels very, very connected to me.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess that's one of my other questions is what is evidence to you?
I say in the show that one of my favorite sort of like paranormal experiences, the way that I experience this stuff is through synchronicity. And one of the things that I think I love the most about it is that it is so deeply idiosyncratic. And occasionally something will happen that is actually like is demonstrably wild, and you tell someone like, "Wow, that's crazy. That's so weird that that happened." But so many little things will just happen, just sort of that just happen like one on one, and that's not evidenced by any scientific means, but it's like a personal feeling and a personal understanding, right? And I think that my favorite kind of evidence is the stuff that feels very idiosyncratic, very like personalized, and very much like this is not just, a blurry photo of something that you don't know. This is like a thing that only matters to you based on your experience and your knowledge and your understanding going in, because it feels very personalized, if that makes sense. I think that I think the reason I love synchronicity so much is that it is almost like it's the hardest thing to be like, no, this really weird thing happened, but it's only weird because like there's this song that I loved when I was 10, and people can be like, that's like you're actually talking about nothing, and it sounds like it is, and it's, I don't know. I think I like the evidence that is sort of full just of very
Poetics.
personalized things.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like a poetic meaning. I think
I've been saying,
that's
oh, go ahead, sorry.
I think it's beautiful. I think and that's also the only thing that really matters are sort of poetry to you, the human experience,
Yeah.
and that's hard to quantify.
I would even say that the most fun paranormal stuff to me is impossible to quantify, is unquantifiable by definition, because I don't know, if I wanted to do a measurable thing, I would be measuring things.
Yeah.
Like I would be doing something. There's so much cool science that I would do if I was just a little bit more motivated. We as a people, we know so little about mushrooms and mycelium and fungus. I think we know like what, 3% of the mushrooms that exist. That's sick. And if I wanted to do science, I'd probably go do it in that field. But I don't want to do science. I want to, talk to ghosts or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, I love mushrooms. I'm a big
I
mushroom
do too.
enthusiast. I
We
love
do a lot of
foraging them.
foraging.
Oh yeah.
Oh, what do you forage over there?
I just a couple days ago I found the largest
Okay.
harvest ever of
Okay.
chanterelles. Just it was
Amazing.
just like gold was thrown upon the
Yeah.
forest floor
Incredible.
and I couldn't
Incredible.
avoid it and that's never happened to me before. I have to search
Very
for
important question.
hours.
What'd you do with them?
I parboiled them and I put them in my freezer.
Okay. We
20
just found, so we have
pounds.
that's crazy.
That's nuts.
That's crazy. That's great.
Yeah.
We just went, so we go swimming at this pond that I really like to swim in. And to get to the cove that I like, you got to walk sort of a mile. And on that path, we found our first black trumpets of the season.
Oh my
Very
god, I
exciting.
just found those too for the
Love
first
them.
time.
Yeah, really good. Really, oh, that's, yeah, very exciting. Especially once you like figure out what they look like, it becomes a lot
Yeah.
easier to scan for them. First black trumpets of the season, and we found a bunch of chanterelles, and we put them in a quiche, and it was
Oh, nice.
really delightful. Yeah, really good. Because the black trumpet is like so mushroom umami, right?
Yeah,
That
it
just
really
felt
is.
really, really nice. Just like a Swiss cheese. Yeah, really big rec. Hey, if you're looking for something to do with some of those shants, we put shants in there too. Big recommend on a quiche.
I love soups. I love quiche and egg. I love mushroom. I love
Hillary
them all.
Schmullery, thank you so much. That's
Oh my
extremely
god,
generous, and
Hillary!
that's wonderful. Thank you. Like that's all the support of people helping us make the second episode of this show. I'm like every time I'm so touched. So thank you. That's really incredible.
Hillary
The
is
second episode,
unbelievable.
it's incredibly generous and incredibly kind. The second episode, we are going to be going down to North Carolina to talk to Mortellus. I don't know if you're familiar. They are
Is that a mushroom?
they are a non-binary coven leader of a Gardnerian Wiccan coven. They do death work, so they're a best-selling author on books on death work and necromancy. They they make spirit boards. They make soaps and ointments and stuff. And we had a production meeting with them a couple weeks ago just to be like, hey, let's sort of figure out like the zones that you want us to shoot in and like what you're comfortable, and what they're having us do stuff that I've truly never seen in a ghost show before. I'm so excited. It's going to be so weird and unique. And the sort of our thought was, because we were talking a little bit like history, like, so the first one, Bell Witch is one of the earliest ghost stories here, and I was like, episode 2, I'd really like to get into like contemporary, like what is like, this is a person whose entire life is magical practice and making things and communing with all sorts of stuff. And so I'm not going to spoil specifically what we're doing, but I will say that I was already very excited, and it got me considerably more excited even.
Awesome.
Plain Toast Mortellus uses they them pronouns, but yeah, they are a very skilled necromancer, and it's gonna be cool, and it's gonna be weird, and I'm very, very excited.
Awesome. Hey, Control Alquim, what's up? I had a question about obviously the synchronicities.
Yeah.
And this is a big question. Oh no, I just lost my list. Okay. Here we go. Okay, so do you think the whole thing with synchronicities, everybody loves to talk about synchronicities, and do you think this sort of like ideological way of looking at like how to proceed is sort of informed by the internet, or just like we're always open to more possibilities of things colliding, or seeing how people live in different realities across the globe, and we're all sort of communing through the screen, the technological sphere, and we're sort of more open to the possibility of synchronicities? And my second part of the question is, how do you deal with that post-production?
How do you mean deal with it?
Like how, when you're ready to like sit down and be like, okay, what's the narrative, and how do you crunch that into how the fuck do we make this make sense?
Yeah. So I will say, one, with regard to the first question, and I was talking to Pander about this also, but I do think that
shout out Pander.
Shout out Pander in the chat, I think. What up?
Yeah.
I do think that people being aware of the concept of synchronicity creates synchronicity in itself. I do think that. Because, and I have believed for a while, as long as I've been doing this, I believe that the phenomenon is extremely interactive, is incredibly like when you are open to it and you reach out for it, it comes to you, and it's, it meets you where you are. And so I definitely, I think that the awareness of synchronicity and the ability to connect to people on the internet absolutely opens it up for us. And in fact, I will say one of the things, so I was telling Rosa, as we were shooting, I told Rosa a lot. I was like, hey, I'm so excited for people to have synchronicities with our show. Because like when I watch ghost shows that are meaningful to me, I have little syncs with those ghost shows sometimes if it feels important, and it's like, oh, this is very cool. Like I'll watch a show and it'll be set in a town, and then later I'll be playing a video game, like a wrestling game, and it gives you a random city, and then it'll be that exact town. And I'm like, oh, that's wild, because I just whatever. Little things sync up, and that makes me feel connected. And I was like, I'm excited about it happening for our show. And now we're sort of in the midst of this synchronicity chain that is happening live. The most recent one was on Thursday, where multiple podcasts that people have reached out to me to be like, hey, do you want to come do talk about the show? The person hosting the podcast tells me in the pre thing, like, oh, I had the synchronicity with when I was watching the show. And it's the only people who have said this so far have been podcast people that I'm appearing on. And so the first one, someone was like, yeah, I was watching the show. They're like, and my wife comes in and just starts talking about the Bell Witch. Didn't know that I was watching the show, doesn't know anything about the show.
Weird.
Because she had read a different thing in her research on different folklore that reminded her of the Bell Witch. I was like, oh, that's very cool. And the next one was this podcast with people like, oh yeah, this is incredible. Yeah. People keep having little synchronicities, and the most recent one, I was in a Savers. I was going thrifting with this cute farmer I've been hanging out with, and this email came in from someone who is a podcast that I was appearing on, and there's another little. The person was like, "Oh yeah, funny little synchronicity happened," and then the farmer found a shirt for their favorite podcast, and they're like, "Oh, normally you have to subscribe for this shirt," and so I've always wanted it, but I never got it because I haven't been able to afford to pay like the monthly or whatever. But they're like, "Oh, I found it here and I'm able to buy it." And I was like, now it's like, here's this podcast. It's connected to the podcast, and that feels so silly, right? That feels so sort of silly and nothing, but it's I don't know. It's like I love a silly synchronicity, and we'll see if it keeps continuing as with the other podcasts. The post-production question is hard, because it definitely basically the way that it happens for me is that we just have to cut out a lot of stuff, which sucks because like the synchronicities are bigger than even what we show on the show. More things happened. So like one thing that didn't come up is that Fox. So in the pilot, spoilers if you haven't seen the pilot, in our pilot, Fox finds a staff on one of our nights, and then in the finale of the pilot, Fox raises the staff and is doing a ritual, and two snakes sort of come from either side.
That was crazy. I loved that.
Yeah, no, it was scary as hell. Two copperhead snakes.
Because they're venomous, right?
They are very venomous. And then like a week or so after we got back, someone died from a copperhead snake bite, and that almost never happens. It usually there have not been any fatalities with copperhead snakes in a while. The reason I was scared is that we were 45 minutes from a hospital and there were two of them. Which is very scary. But so the night before that, though, at the end of the second investigation night, we went back to our hotel room, and we weren't even like filming this. We just did a little tarot, like sort of us thinking, and we should have been filming it, but we're doing our little tarot thing. And we're using the Dragon Tarot deck, which is a very good, very silly, like airbrush wizard on the side of a van sort of aesthetic tarot deck. It rocks. And Fox pulls the Strength card, and the Strength card, which again is thinking about the bridging of the natural world and the sort of like communities and man and whatever. It's this idea of like bringing, like, you get the person holding the jaws of the lion, like the like animal and man, and sort of bridging nature and the civilization, whatever we want to call it. But on this tarot deck was a caduceus, or on this Strength card and from this deck was a caduceus staff, which is a staff with two snakes coming up the ends of it. And so Fox pulling that the night before a moment where she holds.
Uh-oh. I think your mic just went off.
Well, I bopped it. I muted it on accident. So sorry. Fox pulling that card and then holding her staff up, and then two snakes coming out. They're all all these little extra things, yeah. And so it's frustrating a little bit because I'll be talking to our editor, Will from Strangebird, and I'm like, "Can we get this thing in? And can we get this thing in? And can we make sure that we include it?" And he's like, "Hey, we can't. Sorry." He's like, "That's too many things. It'll be too long." So in terms of like how we deal with it in post production, the answer is like by just kind of not even having all of it in because sometimes, like, I don't know, too many things happen.
Yeah, do you feel like
can't be that long.
Do you feel like there's sort of a narrative that's happening in real life when you're filming, and it's sort of like a bit loosey goosey, and then when you're back fixing it, that there's also a different sort of narrative that you have to come up with in order to maybe tie the loose ends together, or maybe you didn't see the point in real life and now you're starting to get it, so even interacting in that environment, you're not seeing the whole picture yet, and you need to make a film from it to get it. That's also weird, right?
I think a really good sort of example of this is the bonus episode that we just put out, the Ray Wise episode, because when we were there, all of these individual sort of spooky, scary things happened, but it didn't feel while we were filming like a full narrative with like a beginning, middle, end, all that. It didn't really feel like that in the moment, and even in editing, like it the version that we have, the version that put out, it feels very real and it feels very like emotionally like resonant, and it makes sense like the start to finish. But I think the big thing is that it doesn't have a resolution. It doesn't have this like
Right.
it doesn't have this like, oh, and we solved it and now kind of
Right.
this whole thing is solved and we're good now, because like that's not real life, right? Like that's not to try to have told a story where like everything's good and everything's fine would have felt very disingenuous to me. And so while in our pilot it absolutely felt like we were led on this story and we were led on this path that sort of did culminate in something that is going to hopefully lead to a next episode, this bonus episode felt a lot more sort of like unresolved, but unresolved in a way that I think feels very real. It feels very real to me. It feels the people who have seen it have felt really sort of moved by the sort of the emotional weight and the stakes of the way that it ends. And so I think that for me, it's less about trying to create a narrative as much as it is saying like what actually happened and how do we represent that, even if it doesn't
Yeah.
have like a pretty bow on the end of it to be like, and now it's done and now we're solved, like
Representation matters.
yeah, it's messy. Everything's messy, and sometimes you're gonna tell a messy story. And I kind of like that. I was so worried because anytime you do like a profile on someone, kind of really liked it. That was the main thing. I was like, all right, if kind of likes it, then I'll be happy. Like, if kind of feels good about how we've like presented this very sort of emotional, very heavy thing, then I will also be happy about it. So I'm happy about it.
And by the way, everybody in chat, if you have a question for Dash, just use the channel point redeem, and I will ask all the questions in the world that you have in a few minutes. So I was wondering if, this kind of touching on what you're saying, do you think that you can ever come to an understanding of the paranormal that was outside of your existing set of beliefs about the world?
I think that I think that the older I get and the more I sort of understand about things, when I think about the paranormal, I try not to have a hard set of beliefs in general. I try not to think. I have a lot of ideas, and I've got a lot of ideas, and I have a lot of I lean in certain ways. I have thoughts about ghosts and UFOs and stuff, but I'm very comfortable being presented with information that will sort of disrupt whatever the thing. I have a friend who's like, "Oh, I don't think you figured the Bell Witch out at all. I think the Bell Witch was a tulpa that the little girl made." And I was like, "Great, let's talk about it. That's fascinating.
Yeah.
I would love to hear about that." And it made a lot of sense. And I'm not saying that it has overwritten what I sort of imagined, because I still, the experiences that we had felt very like nature and natural and a nature sort of being, whatever these people were butting up against. But it could be. I'm very open to. I think especially with the paranormal, I'm very open to being wrong about a lot of things. I think there are some baseline things when we think about human rights, when we think about identities existing, when we think about genocide, when we think about the rise of fascism, all these things where like, no, I feel pretty solid on my stance on all of these things, right? But especially when we're in something as sort of like floaty and nebulous as the paranormal space, like I never want to be a person who is like, oh, this is definitely what's happening and this is definitely what we're dealing with, because that just feels both wrong for the format and also spectacularly uninteresting to me.
Yeah. How can you ever be satisfied with any
Yeah.
personal conclusions, or is it just all an artistic journey where we're all just striving forever and we'll never get there and the journey is the point?
So I do think the journey is the point, I mean it in like when I think about like I don't know, when I think about existing, right? It's about trying to do a little bit better very slowly over a long amount of time. I said this. I think I said this on when I was talking to Pander, but I am more proud of the person that I am right now than I am proud of the person that I was a year ago and the person I was a year before that. And I really hope that I continue to change and grow and do better and exist better as days go on, because I don't, if I ever got to a point where I was like satisfied, then it's like I can just beef it then. Who cares? You know? Like what is the point if we are fully satisfied with the method in which we are existing? I would rather, I will be a little bit better at something that I'm trying to do, or I will be a little bit more understanding of a topic that I don't understand. I will be able to better teach a thing or learn a thing. I don't know. I think there are so many things to do and so many ways to exist, and the idea of being satisfied with where you are as a person is a wild concept to me.
Yeah, I think maybe that the concept of high strangeness and explorative things like this are more of a voyage into the state of the living than it is
Yeah.
ever a state of exploring the undead or whatever. I think it just says everything about us. So yeah. That's why I love talking about ghosts, is that
It's so much fun.
they exist in many forms, and they're not necessarily dead personalities floating around. They are your past, they are other people's pasts, they are ideas. I mean, it's I
Yeah.
guess they are art forms. They're, I love it.
We did last night. We held a live event here in Providence, where I am, at a really cool little indie DIY space, where we debuted the Ray Wise episode, and then afterwards we led the audience in a tulpa creation ritual to make a guardian for the space,
Love it.
to make a being to sort of watch over the space. And I actually been talking to Pander. I was chatting. I was like, what do we like? I'm thinking of ideas. I'm brainstorming all this stuff. And she was like, why don't you ask the Tulpa what its name is in Estes? And we did. And its name is Phil. And that, like, it took, but it did. It just came out. And the person was like, Phil Gravy. And we're like, sick. That's a great name. So Phil Gravy. But this idea of, like, this is not the ghost of a person. This is not the ghost of a, this is not the ghost of a person. This is not something that came into existence because of the deep lore and the stories that had been told. This is something that came into existence because me and Rosa had three people do an exquisite corpse and draw options that we then voted on for the physical, like what this tulpa was going to look like.
Wow.
And then we had people write down character traits, and we did all of this. It was
Sounds
also
like
just
D&D.
like
But
it is like, yeah, absolutely. It's creative energy, and it's intention with the idea of creating a being that can tell you what its name is, and yeah, I think, that is a manifestation of human experience. That's literally being created by our audience and by our sort of our intention and all of that. And so, like, yeah, I love the idea that, like, it doesn't have to be defined as, it doesn't have to be historical. It can be. It doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be rooted in a deep ancient cultural belief. It can be. It can be Phil Gravy, and we made him in a DIY art space with a bunch of dorks.
I love it. What's your hottest paranormal take?
What's my hottest paranormal take?
And by the way, everybody, the questions should work now. I don't know why they weren't working, so do it. Take your
I don't know.
time,
I
take
feel
your
like
time.
I feel like I'm full of them. I feel like I'm full.
Give me
I'm
more
full
than
of-
one.
Okay. I think that UFO disclosure is a big trap. I think it's a smoke screen. I think it's a smoke screen to get people really focused on stuff that isn't going to answer the questions that we have in a meaningful way, and to stop
They're
us
not
from
really
thinking
cool
about other
questions.
political things.
They're like, are aliens real? It's not
Yeah,
really like
yeah.
the cool questions.
Yeah. I think, Let's see. Um, I'm trying to think. Hot takes. Hot takes is hard. I mean, Bigfoot's some sort of ghost. I think
That's
we both like
yeah,
that one.
yeah.
That's a
What do
hot
you
take.
think about demons?
Okay. I think that demons as like a big scary, like you're gonna get a demon attached to you, whatever. A demon is gonna. I think that that's so overblown and so silly the way that people talk about it. I think so much of it is just like full on satanic panic stuff that like is so rooted. I believe fully in the possibility of a lot of beings existing that sort of fill the role that we would call demons. I do not attribute the evils of man to them. I think the evils of man can be attributed pretty squarely to capitalism. Capitalism, colonialism, and imperialism, I think, sort of have that covered. No help needed from demons. I think that I've heard about some really interesting people who like do a lot of work with demons but don't believe in demons or don't believe in them in terms of the sort of the way that they exist in the sort of the Christian
Yeah.
mythology of it. I my take on demons is that I don't think quite so many metaphysical things are out to get us as people would lead us to believe. I think that is
Yeah.
my take on demons. Uh, and I think generally if you've got an EVP session that's like claims to be a demon, it's probably just the shifting of your pocket, the sort of the noise that it makes.
I
Yeah.
love that. I love the concept of demons in art history.
It's great, yeah.
They have a lot of trumpets in their asses, and
Yeah.
they can't resist a good pile of beans to count. And they love geometry and
Yeah.
rocks and all sorts of stuff. And
Yeah.
I honestly really love the imagery of
Yeah.
demons and how absurd and comical they have been. Like, I studied Flemish art, and I just love
Sick.
how they always appear in like the sort of, there's hell and then there's heaven, and then the demons are just going to town on people in hell, and I just think that is comedy, and I love it, and I love the idea that used to scare the living daylights out of people. Just seeing a couple of crazy demons with chicken feet, just
Yeah. I even like to that how much of those physical representations were literally just like someone being like, I hate this fucking guy, and so I'm gonna draw a thing on this demon to let everyone know that this belt buckle, and that's this specific figure in society that like people would know at that time, and how much of it are just like secret diss tracks on people they didn't like. I mean, that's so much of Dante's Inferno, even just being like, all of the people I hate, they're in hell. And that's just how this works.
Exactly.
That's spectacular to me. Yeah.
Man, I just really don't like goats.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
So I love stuff like that. So tell everybody what's next. I'll ask you some questions. Let me see. Let me bring that up.
Yeah.
Hoolery Schmoolery is the only one that's asked a question so far. Get in your questions now. This is the time.
It's very commanding. Very.
Yes, I run a tight ship.
Very commanding. I'd ask a question, if I were on the other side of this, of being commanded to ask a question in such a way. What's next is hopefully we shoot the rest of the show. Jay Burner asks, what's up with the they them? Those are my pronouns. Those are the pronouns that I actually, I've been talking about this a lot. It is not that pronouns are tricky, gender is weird and complicated, and it isn't even that they them feels like correct and right for me. It is that they them are the least bad feeling of the three pronouns that anybody will bother to learn. Pronouns are complicated. We have been told from a very young age in this culture that we have to exist in a very specific context. It sounds plural. It can be. They them can be plural. The singular they them has a lot of historical context too. If this is a question in good faith, then I would encourage you to look up the singular they them and its historical use because it has been used for a very very long time. And
And
if it's
yeah.
not and if it's not a question in good faith, I would encourage you to take the 69 out of your name because that's way too cool of a number to be asking bad faith questions about gender.
Yeah, and in a lot of languages, there's a pronoun reserved, and that it is not as confusing as it sounds in English. So in English, that's just what it is right now.
Yeah. That said, I dream of neo pronouns. I love neo pronouns. I think they're really cool. And if I were ready to be way more disappointed in a lot of people that I know for getting those wrong, I would probably try using them. Right now, they them is probably the most convenient and easiest one for me because, again, of the three that anybody will learn, it feels the least bad. Um, what's next is we are hopefully shooting the rest of the show. I have a whole 10 episode first season planned. We're going to North Carolina to really profile Mortellus. That's going to be really cool and weird, and I'm very excited about
Yeah,
that. We
sounds
have another
great.
episode in North Carolina we want to do. I want to go to New Orleans, and I want to look into. And this almost felt a little synchronous. I had been planning this like I want to go to New Orleans, and I want to look into actual vampires. That's
Okay.
so loaded with queerness and deviance and the idea of existing outside of the way that you are told that you can exist. I am so excited about. I'm so excited about going. And then as soon as I said this to the filmmaker, someone went viral on TikTok with a story about meeting real vampires, and then all these people started coming out with stories of meeting real vampires. And so I was like, sick, cool, that's exciting. Oh, Hillary, we're gonna get to your question. I think Sybil was trying to get a couple more questions on the list, but I will be whatever your question is. I will be answering it. Um, yeah, we have a whole first season planned. I'm so excited about it, and we are currently crowdfunding for again the crowdfund right now is for episode 2, but anything above the goal that we reach we'll use to just shoot episode 3, episode 4, and so on. That is the plan. Yeah, I want to shoot this 10 episode first season in the American South. I didn't even mention this. Like, I love the South. I'm from San Francisco. I'm a person who was raised and told like the South is scary, the South is bad, everyone in the South is trying to get you. And then I spent some time there, and I was like, oh, it's just like anywhere. It's just like there's shitty people, there's cool people, there's amazing queer and trans people, there's amazing people just like me who are thriving and existing there. I love the South. I love Memphis was like the first city that I spent a lot of time in where I was like, oh, this is actually fucking sick. And I would consider living there if the humidity didn't destroy me.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah, you're
so
focusing on the South for this
for the
series.
first
Yeah.
season, we're in the rural American South. For the second season, I think we'll maybe even go somewhere else. And I haven't planned that yet. I would love for the show to take us to other countries. That would be cool. I want to travel. I want to go see. I want to be told weird stories by weird people in weird places. And I think that a ghost show is a pretty cool way to do that. Um,
All right.
I yeah,
Okay, you ready? All right, we got some questions.
I'm ready. I got some questions. Cool.
And Jay, you're not that new. Okay, Jay. Hoolery Schmoolery says, I've had an experience when I lost a friend where 5 of us went to my home to cry, laugh, tell stories of Amy, who was so funny in life and a prankster. Can lots of emotion cause a poltergeist? Can lots of emotion cause poltergeist activity, or may it have been her getting us to laugh? A salt shaker flew across the room, making us jump and begin to laugh.
I think that those are two really good theories. I think that those are two really good theories as to what that was. I think that lots of sort of attention and emotion and sort of focusing on the memory of like a very dear and beloved friend. I think that can sort of cause a manifestation of ability, whether of activity, whether it is your friend whether the sort of the spirit of your friend or the energy of your friend that sort of exists in the head and the thoughts and the emotions of everyone present. And I think that that's one of the ones where like I don't really know if it matters the distinction, right? Like, is this the spirit of my friend manifesting itself in the sort of in the physical plane, or is it the spirit of my friend as they exist in our memories and our hearts and
Exactly.
all of the people? Because in either case, it's your friend, right? In either case, it is sort of your friend who you love having a tangible effect on the world around you. That's a beautiful story,
Yeah.
and B, that's great. I love that. I love that you got to experience that. I hope it wasn't too scary. It sounds like it was kind of fun. I also think if it's salt, that's so funny too, because culturally, salt is this like thing that wards off ghosts. You make a circle of salt, it keeps you safe. So the idea
And you're
of
like,
something
no.
phantasmal manifesting in the salt to be like, hey, guess what? Salt, that's spectacular to me.
Yeah. Dana Mob wants to know, do you think something like Jesus could possibly be something like a ghost misconstrued?
When you say, so you mean like Jesus when people perceive Jesus appearing now, or when you like Jesus as the sort of as the figure in history, or
I think maybe Dana
in
Mob
the
means like a sort of like everybody's talking about Jesus, so maybe
yeah.
Jesus never really existed. Maybe he's just a ghost. Is that what you mean?
I mean,
Originally?
maybe. I cannot claim to have a lot of experience with the specifics of Christian mythology, but I think that here I'll say this: I have a friend who is very convinced, and I actually believe them, that they had an experience with Santa Claus, and this is not like oh Jesus Santa atheist bull whatever. I have a friend who genuinely believes that they engaged with someone who they're like you're not gonna they're like I don't even want to tell you. You're not gonna fucking believe. Like a guy showed up at the bar they were bartending at, who looked like Santa Claus and was whimsical, and then produced a toy as if from nowhere, and then just disappeared. And I believe them. And here's what I think: I think that if the figure of Jesus is meaningful to you, which it
Yeah.
very well could be, because the actual teachings of even if you read the book, the teachings of the guy, he says
That's the
some cool stuff.
point.
I think that's kind of the point. And if the
Yeah.
figure of Jesus is meaningful to you, and the sort of the apparition of Jesus appears to you, great. Take that meaning and experience that, and I hope that sounds fucking cool. If that's your god and that's the god that you believe in, every time I have an experience that feels like Dionysus is dealing with me in a personalized way, that feels great and special, and I feel cared for and protected and guided in a way that is so meaningful to me. And if Jesus is your guy and and you feel that appear, sick. Take that and let it lead you somewhere interesting and important. I think that a lot of the people I think that a lot of people who claim to find meaning in the guy don't necessarily represent that in a real way in this country that I live in, but that's sort of a whole other thing. I think that's sort of a whole other thing,
No,
and we don't
beautifully
have to get
said.
into that. Thank you.
Um, Pander Sarah asks, why don't we call demons cremins?
I think pander be the change you want to see. I think if you want, I think if that's, and hey, guess what? If you start doing it, I'll start doing it. Not every time, but at least 30 to 40% of the time, I'll start doing it. And people are gonna be like, "What?" And I'll be like, "Hey, listen, I got a friend, and it's fine. We don't have to. But I think this is a social media campaign that you could start of let's call demons Cramons.
Plain Toast No Jam asks, how does Dash feel about all the tech that is used in paranormal investigations? Does it distract from the spirit, pun, of investigating, or do they think that it is helping to prove that entities exist?
I think that it sort of depends on the tech and what it does. Um, I think that the tech that I really like is stuff that sort of helps you. Like I love the SS method where you use a spirit box and you plug headphones in so only one person can just hear the spirit box and they sort of repeat. And the thing that I love about it is I feel like it puts the person inside into sort of like a trance state. And I think that when you're in a trance state, it is easier to actually engage with things that are potentially beyond the physical. I don't think that it's proving anything. I don't think that anything is proved with investigation techniques, and I think that it suggests a lot of things and implies a lot of things, and I think that's the sort of the most fun of it. But I think that some of the technology, I do think it's not the technology in itself, but the way that it gets used. And I think this goes towards the thing I was saying before of people trying very hard to make this into like a hard science instead of like a fun pseudoscience. And I definitely see this in a lot of ghost shows where they'll be like, here's our fucking laser grid. And no one ever explains what the laser grid does. And I'll tell you, I don't know what the laser grid does. It's expensive, so I don't own the laser grid. But I've never seen an encounter with the laser grid where I'm like, ah, yes, ghosts. Because I don't know. Like, first of all, sorry, pet peeve ghost show, tell me what your gear does. Tell me what your thing does, at least in one episode. You have to have one episode where you tell me what the thing does. Otherwise, I'm never going to know what the thing does. That said, I don't think any gear intrinsically distracts from the ghost, but I think the way that a lot of people do it can be distracting because I think it can be very much like, this is our science and these are our tools and these are the things that we do to measure stuff and that's how you know, and I don't think you can know. But
no,
yeah,
and that's why one of my favorite characters to dress up as is Jack Baggins, who knows everything.
Somebody just I posted paranormal was trending, hashtag paranormal was trending.
Oh, really?
And yeah, and I posted like, oh, hashtag paranormal is trending, this is our gay ghost show, check it out. And we got a response on Twitter that was just someone doing the middle finger emoji, and I was like, okay. And I clicked on the person's profile, and the first tweet is just a who's ready for ghost adventures. And there's a retweet, and I was like, hey, you know what, that tracks. That makes sense. Hey, that tracks.
That tracks, and I love it so much, and it's so much fun to make fun of.
Yeah.
Jay Burner wants to know, do you believe in ghosts? Dash.
I mean, this might not be the answer that is expected, but I am very open to ghosts, and I've talked to a lot of stuff. I've been poked in the ribs when no one was there. Wow. A bunch of times, and I wish any other part of me, any other part. I don't want the ribs is a bad place to be poked, but especially in a spooky way. Anyway, I've had a lot of things that are unexplainable that I truly am like, I don't know what that was. Felt like a ghost. Feels like a ghost. But do I believe in ghosts? I think that belief implies genuine, like, this is what it is, and I feel confident about it. And I don't know that I believe in anything. I'm very open to things. I don't believe that ghosts don't exist. Right. I think ghosts could exist. I think a lot of stuff could exist, and I'm very excited to keep trying to make contact with a lot of stuff that may or may not exist.
Beautifully said. Ketchup John Mustard asks, where can we watch the show? ! Guest in the chat, and you will find the link that takes you directly there and to all the other stuff.
We have a link tree set up. Oh, sorry. Go. We have a link tree set up that has our pilot, it has our website, it has our TikTok and our Instagram, and it also has our Seed and Spark crowdfund campaign. We have some really cool backer rewards on there that people have. People can get Polaroids. We've been using Polaroid cameras in our investigations. You can have those. Like, we'll sign them and send them to you, the ones that we use for the episode. A lot of cool, weird stuff. Check out our backer rewards. I feel very good about some of them. I feel good about all of them, but I feel very excited about some ones where I'm like, no one else doing this shit. I feel very proud of.
Nice. Millennial Kraken wants to know, are there any plans for any Savannah, Georgia haunts? Have always loved the rich paranormal history there.
Yeah, so I want to thank you, Emmy. Yeah, one of the back rewards is a zine, A Beginner's Guide to Ghost Hunting. It's a little zine that I wrote and my partner did all the art for. The only way to get it is by backing our Seed and Spark campaign. There's a digital version, there's a physical version that I'll sign, but it's very cute. It's a bunch of really cute art of my fursona ghost hunting. Just drop the furry in there if we want a little bit. If it's a whole, Okay. I contain multitudes. I want to go to Georgia. Yeah, West Georgia, I think, is the location that I have sort of planned. Specifically, there is a, I can say this, I don't think this is too much spoilers. There's a, the University of West Georgia has a specific, oh, I'm, the name, hold on, there's, to look this up very quickly, just to, this is very embarrassing because I like this person a lot, and I'm forgetting their fucking
It's okay.
name.
I can barely handle anything when I'm on the computer, so I'm a deer in the headlights constantly as soon as I go live. I can't remember anything anyone has ever said.
Can I? Oh my goodness, this is a queer elder. This is a queer elder whose name I'm forgetting. Um,
Pander Sarah, I see you looking.
it's Ingo Swan. Ingo Swan, queer elder, remote viewer, predicted rings around which is the one of the planets that you can't see the rings, like knew that there were rings there just from like remote viewing, which is cool.
Oh,
One of the ones where the rings are not like very, their rings are very small and you can only see them with like a big like a big mega telescope or whatever.
Uranus?
Maybe that's the one. I don't know planets.
Uranus.
Um, Uranus. Ingos. There's a college in West Georgia that has a full like Ingo Swan fellowship program, and I'm fascinated by this, and I love Ingo Swan. Love a lot of the history, and so I'm trying to when we go to West Georgia, I really want to be talking to people from that, talking to people involved in that, and I think that we'll probably try to take that and investigate something else that is in sort of like in Georgia and West Georgia. I don't know if Savannah, I don't know where Savannah is in terms of, but like we can do a little drive too. But also, if you've got a cool thing from Savannah that you're like, Dash, you got to check this out. Hey, get at me. Tell me about it. Tell me about it. Maybe I will, you know?
How much time do you have? Because there are 9 more questions.
We can do more questions. We can do
Okay.
some more questions.
Tug's
How much
not
time do you have?
I've 5 more hours, baby.
I probably don't have that. I probably don't have that much.
Tugsnog wants
got
to know, does the view of the paranormal differ based on the cultural upbringing of the person? Great question. Would that result in
Absolutely.
different findings? Is it always... Okay, these are like 4 questions, Tugsnog.
That's okay. That's all right.
Would that result in different findings, or is it always different and personal regardless of which country the person grew up in?
I think it is always different and personal, sort of regardless of the country that the person grew up in. But I also think that your culture has a huge effect on the way that you engage with the paranormal and the way that the paranormal engages with you. I say this a lot. My whole sort of thing is about liminal identity. People, we accept more recently. I think paranormal people have accepted that liminality, bridges, borders, hotels, schools, things like that are a sort of a hotbed or a real sort of lightning rod for paranormal activity. And so I believe that liminal identity also is that. And I say that as a trans person, as a non-binary person. I'm also a mixed race person. I grew up in this bad country, not really being allowed to be Korean and very much not being white. And so my own space and my experience of culture has been very specific to me, and that colors the way that I navigate any space, whether it is paranormal or mundane, because it would be impossible not to, right? It would be impossible not to be sort of affected by the culture that we are raised in. And I think in some ways, in some ways that is negative, in some ways that is positive. When we are raised in a culture that very consistently tells you that queerness is wrong or bad, that transness is something to be feared, we are going to have internalized ideas of queerness and transness, even as a queer and trans person. When we are raised in a culture that has sort of racism baked into it fundamentally at its core, we are going to have racist things just in our brain, in our concept of existing, the way that we exist, and we have to unlearn those things, and we have to take the time to figure out the way that we are existing and exist in a way that does not cause harm to the people around us and the people that we exist in. And I think that if that is true for navigating mundane physical spaces, of course it's true for navigating metaphysical spaces. Of course it's true for navigating everything. So I think that the culture that you were raised in absolutely colors the way that you experience magic, and I think that it experiences. I actually don't think those two things are different, right? It's always going to be individual because every person is an individual. Everything is going to be deeply idiosyncratic because of that. I think, at least.
Yeah. And maybe technology will help us speak Spanish to Spanish spirits.
I would, yeah, definitely. But don't use the one that uses generative AI.
Oh,
Use
that's
a
a
different
question.
non-generative AI. Okay.
Well, that's a question coming up. I saw
All
that.
right.
Okay, Jay wants to know, do you think when you dream about a deceased person, do you think it's them reaching out from beyond the grave?
I think it can be. I think it could be. Um, Maybe it's you reaching out and them answering. You know, I think that it absolutely can be that. But I think that. But I also think sometimes a dream is just a dream. You know.
Yeah, or like that experience that Hoolery Schmoolery said. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
It was it.
Absolutely.
It was, it was it. You felt for a moment that again, and so that is it.
Yeah.
Amanda from high school asks, I'm curious if you have thoughts on mental illness connected to the paranormal. I ask because I used to feel presences and other strange things of that nature around me all the time until I was diagnosed and medicated. Now I don't experience that anymore, but I still wonder if those feelings meant something.
I think so. I think that my real answer here is that this is a really nuanced and complicated thing to talk about, right? Because I think that it's very easy, and I think we especially have to think about the people who sort of get labeled with sort of mental illness in terms of how we as a culture treat people, how we treat people based on race and class and gender, and sort of how all of that is used to sort of disenfranchise people. So I don't think that there is a hard answer to this idea of, you know, is it mental illness that is making us experience things. I think that you know, there are things that we experience, there are things that we exist with that can make us have experiences. I think that there are things that can make us perceive things that either are there and otherwise imperceptible, or are not actually happening, and sort of we are struggling with that ourselves. I don't think that I definitely don't think that there is a 100% of the time answer for something like this. And I also, being very realistic, I don't feel like I've got the sort of the cultural competency to give you a good and nuanced and sort of researched answer to that. I think that, yeah, that's my answer. I hope that doesn't feel like a cop out.
Cinnamon asks, can the paranormal demons or spirits be a good way to shape your identity? I like to call temptations and behaviors that aren't good demons, and everything's that is good vibes is God. Cinnabon, how about some periods in there, huh? Jeez.
You can think of punctuation as gods, and
Yeah.
you can think of, I don't know. I think I would encourage people in general to sort of push outside of the way that sort of mainstream Christian culture tells us to think about morality. I think if you have a specific frame of looking at things that helps you, cool, and you feel good about that, sick. But I also think that no, that's an interesting question. It's an interesting question. I think that I don't think that you have to consciously try to have the paranormal and have the mystical sort of guide your personality. I think that it naturally will as you engage with it and as you do these things. I think everything that we do, all of our interests and the things that we spend our time on, sort of guide us and change us and sort of make us who we are. So, you know, I would
Absolutely.
encourage you to maybe consider some of the Christian framing, but also maybe you're taking it back. Maybe you're thinking about Christian framing in a different way that is bringing you joy and power. And if that is the case, then I support you.
Akatul asks, are paranormal phenomena just as common today? Is it just a matter of putting out there that you're interested and people will come to you with your experiences, or is it a difficult search? Is your sexual community's link to cryptids, etc., aiding you with finding the subjects of your show and paranormal sightings in general? Were your friends what got you into this?
Calling it my sexual community is so fucking funny. That's so funny. That's the funniest way anyone has ever referred to this. So thank you for that. Does it?
I've never read that word before.
Yeah, I have not even a single time have I heard anyone say your sexual community. Is delightful, really spectacular, really just spectacular. Good work. I think that, yeah, one of the ways that we found interview subjects was finding people on queer and trans community groups, finding people who are finding magic groups and asking, like, hey, I'm shooting the show. We're trying to, these are the sorts of people we're trying to talk to. So yeah, I think the community connection, the community reach out is definitely helpful in that. I think that with regard to, is it just as common now? I think so. I don't have the numbers. There's people who have the numbers for sure. John Keel said that the spookiest stuff happens on Wednesdays. I don't know where he got that from, but I say it a lot. Yeah. I say it a lot like it's a fact.
We had Fred Anderson on here also saying it's on Wednesday at like 3 a.m.
I've heard the 3 a.m. one. Okay, sorry, wait, but then it would be starting Tuesday the Tuesday nights. To the Wednesday?
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
I'll just go out on Wednesdays because I think the Wednesday is a good, cool one. Like Wednesday, I think that it's just as common, probably. I think that, yeah, you just got to reach out for it. I think if you reach out for it, you'd be surprised what reaches back out at you.
Reach out into your sexual community. And you
reach out to your sexual community.
Be surprised what comes.
And they'll be like, what? Who is this? Why have you named the group chat that? And you'll have to explain.
Sexual community group chat. I love that. Uh-huh. Okay, Jay. I mean, we've got Jay going. Okay, Jay wants to know, I played the Ouija board one summer and an apparent demon named Edifi wanted to kill me. This was a reoccurring thing every time we played. Was someone screwing with me?
Sounds like someone was screwing with you, and maybe that someone was maybe that person was Edifi,
Yeah.
But someone definitely, I think, whether the metaphysical or the Waluigi board, I think the metaphysical, hi Plant Danny, I think the metaphysical or the mundane, someone was screwing with you for sure.
Yeah. Dana says, going off of Ghostbusters, can you fuck a ghost? My answer to that is yes, you can.
I think definitely. You know that Dan Aykroyd comes from a long line of like spiritualists and
apparently
deep in the ghost stuff. And you know that scene where Dan Aykroyd gets sloppy toppy from a ghost is like the one thing that he really fought hard to keep in the film. So the man knows, Who are you gonna trust?
Spectrophilia.
Bustin' makes him feel good.
Sure does. Okay. Doge wants to know, I've had a lot of synchronicities in my life, and sometimes it's very difficult to not overanalyze them. I've had a lot of trauma, and that seriously adds to my sometimes over-curiosity about why I'm having certain experiences at very specific times. How do I find the balance of being just curious enough and not going into paranoia mode? I've dealt with too many narcissists in my life, and I have a lot of trauma and paranoia around that.
Yeah, it's hard. I was talking earlier about feeling like laughter grounds me. Laughter helps keep me grounded in these sorts of things.
Same
and I think find your grounding thing. Find the thing that sort of helps you and understand. And this is I will quote my friend John Tenney on this, because Tenney had a really meaningful thing where he said that anytime the phenomena or something sort of taps you on the shoulder to get your attention, you can always turn around and be like, I'm actually good. Not right now. I'll come back to you at some point, or maybe I won't. But the invitation to engage with the strange or the paranormal, you don't always have to take it. And especially if you're not feeling in a good spot for it, if you're not feeling in a good headspace for it, you don't got to do it. And when you learn, as you learn to set those boundaries, right? As you learn to set those boundaries sort of with the metaphysical, I think it'll even help you learn to set boundaries with the physical and the mundane, which everyone should learn to mind their boundaries better. So I think just know that you don't gotta be in anything. You don't have to be engaging in anything, even if it feels very directed, even if it feels very much like, this is really trying to get my attention. You never gotta say yes to that. You can always be like, I'm actually good. I'm gonna take some time, sort my shit, and then I'll come back to it when I'm ready.
I love that you call it the mundane. A friend of Baphomet asks, what do you think about AI tools for paranormal investigation? It seems like it'd be so difficult to keep the app from just scrubbing the internet for info on the location and giving false positives.
I think that every time you use generative AI, it destroys so much water and also the environment. And I think that AI tools in general are bad and suck ass. And I think that it's bad for the environment, it's bad for creatives, it's bad for existing, and I don't think you should do it. So I won't be using generative AI tools for investigation, and I don't think you should either, is my take on that one.
The Nerdifer asks, my question is tough to pinpoint, but I guess what I want to ask is comedy supernatural? I found that there is something to a crowd's energy at shows. Same with music.
Yeah.
There's something in the arts, right? Magic? I have a lot to say about that.
I think that charisma is supernatural.
Yeah.
I think charisma is an unmeasurable thing that deals with the influence of people, and it deals with manifesting things and creating things and making the world a different way. I think charisma is a supernatural thing, and I think that applies to comedy and music and everything.
Yeah, and there's something, I was talking about this earlier today, there's something about, for example, doing a stand-up show or whatever. I don't have the balls to do stand-up, but the audience is there to play, to receive, and there's something very important about that relationship between showing up for something, having a receptive audience, because if you go to do stand-up to an audience that doesn't necessarily see the world the way you might see things, no jokes
And I
are gonna
have.
land. Oh my god.
Yeah.
Can you tell us? No jokes are gonna
Yeah.
land. So there's that play element that's required for the arts,
Yeah.
for the expression, and in my opinion, paranormal investigating.
Definitely. So stand up. People think of stand up as a monologue, and it's not. It is a conversation. It's a conversation where one side speaks and the other side laughs, and it's not a verbal conversation with speaking in words, but the energy has to flow back and
Yeah.
forth. And if you try to do it like a monologue, you will fail. Yeah, it is, but it's revelry. It's gathering together to eat and drink and be merry and to laugh. It is
It's Dionysian
I don't know how to
shit.
pronounce it. It's Dionysus stuff.
It's got
And
that
that's very meaningful to
Dionysus
me.
in them, you know? It's like
Hmm.
that's it.
It certainly is magical, I think.
I would watch Sybil doing stand up. No, you wouldn't. I'm too scared. I'm very scared. All right. Well, I think that might be all the questions, and I love that we ended there because to me, this sort of thing is magic. You know, finding people
I think so.
talking about it, being on Twitch, doing it this way, being live.
Yeah.
I think it's a beautiful crossroads. Big Dionysus energy. Yeah, that big D energy. Oh wait, okay, plain toast. One more. The last one. If
Yeah.
charisma is supernatural, how do you explain the rise of excessively evil charismatic figures from history, such as Hitler? Oh wow. Okay, you dropped the 8. Okay.
Yep.
Demons,
There he is.
egregores.
I don't think that magic is intrinsically good.
Yeah.
I think that magic is what we do with it, and I think that it can be good and it can be evil. I don't think that anything is intrinsically good. I think that a lot of stuff is neutral, powerful, and neutral, and I think that you can use it for evil and you can use it for good. And I think that a lot of people have used it for evil. I think we see that even now. I think we see a lot of people who use their massive platforms, whether they wrote a pretty mid book about wizards or whether they are a YouTuber who's wrestling professionally now. I think a lot of people use their platform to promote a lot of evil bullshit, and I think that is charisma. I would never say they're not charismatic, but I
Yeah.
do think they're not good, and and I think that I think magic is what you do with it, and I think that it is on us to make things better than we found them. And that is how I try to exist. My goal is to, in general, make things even just a little bit better than how I found them. And I think that's the goal, right?
I think that's a great note to end on, and also what you're making with Liminal is just
Thank you.
making things a little better than you found them. And I can't wait to watch the second episode. I'm gonna watch that. And Panther Sarah, thank you very much. So
Thank you.
exclamation mark guest. You can find all the links. Let's give a round of applause to Dash.
Oh, thank you. That's very sweet. And if people want to make our crowd fund better than they found it, they're welcome to kick in to help us make episode 2. And Sybil, we got to go look for ghosts at some point. I think that would
Oh,
be
I
cool
would
and
love
fun.
it. I would love it.
Oh, yeah.
You're exactly who I want to look for ghosts with, because I'm
Hell yeah.
just acting a fool the whole time.
No, me too though. I think it'll be good.
All right, everybody. I'll be back in a couple minutes. I'm going to say goodbye to Dash backstage. So, BRB.
Thank you, everybody.